WICR, rocking the campus in New Rochelle.
Welcome back, folks, for our second segment of The Rock is On. We just finished talking about the college basketball championship and previewing that. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. We are finally going to make, or I'm finally going to make my baseball predictions for the 2017 MLB season. And I'm going to do two segments. I'm going to talk about the American League, and then I'm going to do my American League predictions. Then I'm going to do my National League. And then after I'm done with my National League, I will give my World Series prediction and winner. So here we go. Start off with the American League East. Oh, excuse me. We'll start off with the American League East. And the team who I think is going to win the American League East is the Boston Red Sox. And you know what? You look at what this team did last year. They had a phenomenal lineup, Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr., Hanley Ramirez, Dustin Pedroia, Xander Bogaerts, and then, of course, Big Papi, who retired last year, or at the end of last year, who's no longer with the team this year. But you know what? Even without Big Papi, this team is still one of the most dangerous lineups in all of baseball. I mean, you had Mookie Betts, who hit 31 home runs last year, drove in 113 RBIs, along with Hanley Ramirez, who hit 30 home runs and drove in 111 RBIs. And then also you have the emergence of Andrew Benintendi, who came on with the Red Sox at the late in the year last year. And you know what? He's proven that he can be a major leaguer. He can be a starter. I believe he's going to be their starting left fielder for this year. And you know what? And one thing, and I was looking this up, and one thing that just caught my eye is that last year, the Red Sox as a team hit 282. I'm going to repeat myself. The Boston Red Sox as a team last year hit 282. I know, it's when you think about that, you're thinking, you know what, hey, at least maybe 5-6 of their starters are hitting over 300. And they're not only a home run hitting team, they're a team that can hit for average, drive in runs, steal bases. And that's something you got to keep in, and that's something, you got to look out for the Red Sox. Or, if you're playing the Red Sox, especially if you're an American League East team, you got to have good pitching to slow their hot bats, or you got to slow their bats and cool off their lineup. Because when they get going, they're like a juggernaut. They're not going to stop. And also, and the Red Sox have a good rotation as well. I mean, you have David Price, who, granted, has his postseason, how can you say, jitters or struggles, so to speak. But in the regular season, though, he's a phenomenal pitcher. He's one of the best pitchers in the game, along with Rick Porcello, who can pretty much compete for an AL Cy Young every year, though, and he's a very underrated pitcher. And then, of course, last but not least, one of the big free agent accusations that the Red Sox made, and not only that they made, but in all of baseball, was the accusation of Chris Sale, who they acquired via trade from the Chicago White Sox. So you have a three-headed monster at the rotation, along with a potent lineup, which, any opposing pitchers could be, I don't want to say intimidated, but it's just a hassle to deal with if you're an opposing pitcher to go up against that lineup with the Red Sox. So, like I said, Red Sox, I'm picking the Boston Red Sox to win the AL East. Now, moving on to the AL Central, I am picking the Cleveland Indians. And you know what? I'm telling you, I honestly, I'm on the Indians bandwagon. I've been on the I was on the bandwagon since they made their postseason run last year, and even before. I like the Indians even before they went on their postseason run, because I said, this team could play. They have a phenomenal pitching staff, a few good bats in the lineup, but it's just they all had to put it together. Because I remember in 2015, they had the pitching. The pitching was there, but the bats was just inconsistent. Some days the bats were on a roll and they were getting going, and then there were some days they just the hitting wasn't there. So, I'm picking the Cleveland Indians for a myriad of reasons, and of course, one of them to win the AL Central, and one of them is being, I think they have one of the best pitching rotations in all of baseball. I think them and the Mets are the top two pitching them and the Mets, the Indians and the Mets have the top two have the best two rotations in all of baseball. Because, you have Corey Kluber, who's your ace last year, or who was your ace, along with Carlos Carrasco, Danny Salazar, and then you know what? Trevor Bauer and Josh Tomlin, those guys aren't great, but they're pretty solid and they're pretty decent, and they're back of the end bullpen guys who can get the job done. It was just unfortunate for them last year that they had to play a bigger role than they had to, because due in part to no Salazar or no Carrasco, who were out last year, who were out of the playoffs due to injury. And also, I also like the Indians lineup as well. It's it's a bit unconventional because you have Carlos Santana, who's primarily a cleanup hitter. Maybe you put him in the fifth spot, leading off, which I wasn't fond of Terry Francona doing, but it is what it is. It's very unconventional. So I like their lineup when it consists of Carlos Santana, Francisco Lindor, Jason Kipnis, the return of Michael Brantley, who was their best outfielder last year. And then also, you have one of the Indians made a splash in free agency, and they acquired a big-time bat in their lineup in Edwin Encarnacion, who is a major, major upgrade over Mike Napoli. Now, granted, Mike Napoli was a phenomenal player for the Indians. He did a tremendous job for them, especially down the stretch. But if you go around and take a survey and ask 100 different random people who would they rather have, Edwin Encarnacion or Mike Napoli, they go with Edwin Encarnacion. In this team, and the Indians pretty much have their, they added a few pieces here and there, and they're going to get some key guys back. And they were without some, like I said, they were out. They didn't have their second or third string pitchers along with their top outfielder. So they're getting those guys back along with their bullpen, which is a great bullpen. I think it's the best bullpen in all baseball. When you have Brian Shaw, Andrew Miller, and Cody Allen, their closer. But the Indians, like I said, they're going to get healthy. You assume and you hope that they get healthy, and they're going to be a lot better than they were last year. Because last year, it kind of, how can I say it? It surprised some people. Their run to the World Series last year, and and despite having a 3-1 lead and then losing the World Series, they had the Cubs on the ropes. The Cubs were the far better team than the Indians, without a doubt. So, like I said, the Indians are going to be a potent team all around. They're well-rounded. And, of course, not to mention they have one of the best managers in the game in Terry Francona. Now, the AL West, who I'm picking to win the AL West this year, is the Houston Astros. And, that's another, I'm always throughout this segment, I feel like I'm just praising, these teams' lineups and saying they're very potent and they're very dangerous. And here's another one with the Astros, because you have a dynamic 1-2 punch in both in the lineup and in the infield with Carlos Correa and Jose Altuve. Altuve is a hit machine, and despite his diminutive stature, he is a flat-out baller, and he plays with a lot of heart, and that's something you gotta admire, whether you're a fan of the Astros or not, or just a baseball fan in general. That's something you gotta admire. And also, those guys, Correa and Altuve, have a lot of pop as well. They're not just, Correa is more of a power hitter, but Altuve, he's more of an average hitter, but he has some pop to his bat as well. And then, of course, you got to throw in George Springer, who, granted, he hasn't been healthy. He's not really an average guy who hits for average, though, but he has a lot of power as well. He can, if healthy, I can see him hitting 30-plus home runs a year. But he's just, injuries has plagued plagued him so far, though, and it's just lack of consistency that's been Springer's problem. But who knows? Maybe he bounces back for this year. And then, of course, lastly, in regard to their lineup, you have the two former Yankees in the Astro lineup with Brian McCann catching, and then Carlos Beltran being the DH, who is returning to Houston, or this is his second stint with the Houston Astros, because if you all recall, he was traded from the Royals to the Astros in the summer of 2004, and he had a phenomenal postseason, an unbelievable postseason. It's kind of reminiscent to Barry Bonds' postseason back in 2002, or Babe Ruth's postseasons in the 30s, or even Daniel Murphy's postseason when he was with the Mets. And then, of course, the the Astros, I think they have one of the best pitchers in the game in Dallas Keuchel. I think he's going to bounce back, and he's going to go back to his 2015 form. But the question remains is, can the other guys like Lance McCullers and those guys and the other pitchers in that rotation, can they step up their game? Because it can't just be Keuchel. Because Keuchel is a great pitcher, but he can't win you every single game. But that's the only concern I have with the Astros. But overall, I think they're going to win the AL West, and I think they're going to bounce back from last year. Now, my wild card teams for the first team. Now, this could be a bit of a shocker for some people, but you know what? This team, I always said, when I looked at this team or watched this team play, I always said they have tremendous talent. And it's just, I felt like they just could never put it together. Some people may disagree with me or may not believe or see what I see though. But with that being said, I'm going to pick the Seattle Mariners to be the number one wild card team and host the wild card game, because you know what? You look at their lineup. They have probably the best 3-4-5 hitters in the game with Robinson Cano, with Nelson Cruz, with Kyle Seager. Come on, that's a pretty hefty duty that any pitcher has to go through. Granted, Cano and Cruz could be a little up there in age though, but Kyle Seager is one of the best third basemen in the game. And Nelson Cruz, despite him being in his late 30s, he could still hit. He's primarily a DH, could play a little outfield here and there, but he can still hit. And Cano had a tremendous season last year. And if you're a Mariner fan, you hope that he builds on that. And then also, the Mariners have a very underrated pitching staff. You have King Felix, or Felix Hernandez. He's one of the top 5 pitchers in the game. The only problem is in years past, though, when he was with the Mariners, is that he would pitch a phenomenal game, but the Mariners didn't have enough run support or didn't give him enough run support. So he would either lose a game by giving up 2-3 runs, or he would get a no decision because they didn't score enough runs for him to win the game. But I like King Felix, though. I think this is the year where he's going to win a Cy Young. Because remember, he won a Cy Young back in 2010. I think he had a record of 13-13, but his ERA was just under 2. But I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think the Mariners will produce runs, will be, I won't say a juggernaut like the Red Sox, but will put up runs on the scoreboard and give their pitchers the wins that they deserve. And then also, you have to throw in the fact that they have Hisashi Iwakuma and James Paxton. Pitchers who aren't really big-name pitchers. It's not like Kershaw. It's not Bumgarner. They have King Felix. He's a top 5 pitcher. But, they have solid pitchers, though, which, not a lot of people recognize or give them credit for. And when healthy, these guys, and they bring their A game every time, they can be pretty difficult to manage or pretty difficult to hit off of. And then lastly, I'm going to throw in the fact that I think the Mariners struck gold last year with their manager, and Scott Servais. He did a phenomenal job with them. They were in the postseason hunt up until the very end. Finished the last season with a record of 86-76, And I think this year is going to be the year the Mariners are going to put it together and finally get into the playoffs for the first time since 2001, where they won 116 games. And they had that phenomenal season. And that was Ichiro's rookie season, by the way. So that's how long it's been since Seattle has postseason baseball. Now, for my second wild card team, this is another shocker, which some people may not disagree with me, but you know what? I'm going to pick the Kansas City Royals, and here's why. Some people, you hear the reports on the offseason that the Royals, they're going to look to sell their players. They're in limbo. They won't be able to re-sign everybody. You know, the whole 9 yards. But if you look at it this way, I think the Royals have one good run left in them. Because we saw how they won the World Series when they defeated my Mets. You know, they worked the count, they put the ball in play, and they just made things happen. And I think and they still have most of their players, they still have from that World Series team. You got Eric Hosmer, you got Mike Moustakas, along with Salvador Perez, who was the MVP of the World Series when they won, and Lorenzo Cain, who's a great hitter and a great fielder, along with Alcides Escobar, who was great with the glove and he's a great leadoff hitter. So they have a nucleus of guys, or a core group of guys, that could put it together. And also, I just want to say, they traded one of their best relief pitchers, Wade Davis, though, which, you know what, it kind of takes a halt. It takes a, how can I say it? It hurts your bullpen in that sense, though. It takes a hit in your bullpen, though, but you require a phenomenal hitter, one of the best hitters, one of the best young emerging hitters in the game, and Jorge Soler from the Cubs. And you know what? Jorge Soler is going to be a starter. He's a starter in this league. He couldn't start last year because he was more of a platoon guy because the Cubs have a lot of depth on their team, though, so there was no way that Joe Maddon can play him. Or there was a way, but it would have to be like every other day or maybe in a pitch hitting situation. But you know what? They're going to have Jorge Soler, Alex Gordon, and Lorenzo Cain in the outfield, and that's a pretty good outfield if you ask me. And then also their bullpen. Granted, their bullpen's not the same like it was back in 2014 or 2015 when they won the World Series, but it's still pretty decent. They have Herrera and then they have Joaquim Soria, two solid guys. It's just a matter is, can those guys stay healthy, and can the other relievers, along with the starting pitching rotation, be effective throughout the course of 162 games, or throughout the course of a baseball season? That's the only enigma with the Royals. Other than that, I think they can put it together, and I think they can be a playoff team. And that concludes this segment. When we get back, we'll make my National League picks and my World Series prediction.